Thank you very much. Madam Speaker, Mr. Vice President, members of Congress, the First Lady of the United States. She's around here somewhere. I have come here tonight not only to address the distinguished men and women in this great chamber, but to speak frankly and directly to the men and women who sent us here. I know that for many Americans watching right now, the state of our economy is a concern that rises above all others, and rightly so. If you haven't been personally affected by this recession, you probably know someone who has. Because of this plan, 95% of working households in America will receive a tax cut. A tax cut that you will see in your paychecks beginning on April 1st.
Notice how he said early on that he was not only speaking to the joint session of Congress, but to the American people, because he trusts the American people to understand him and what his goals are. And the American people who elected him are now giving him around a 68 to 70% approval rating, showing an inordinate amount of trust and confidence in his leadership. So we want to take a look at the disparity in the kind of reporting that has been going on in the major TV networks, the major commercial TV networks, and the major newspapers, publications, about how President Obama's plans are going to affect taxpayers.
Think that we can continue on our current course. I work for the American people, and I'm determined to bring the change that the people voted for last November.
That change begins with new priorities, such as $770 billion in tax cuts over the next 10 years for the middle class, $150 billion for alternative energy sources, and $634 billion for a health care reserve fund to pay for whatever health. Much of the spending is being done with money the government does not have, creating a $1.75 trillion deficit next year alone.
The president's beginning to make President Bush look like a piker when it comes to spending.
Almost $1 trillion of the spending, $989 billion, comes from new taxes over the course of the next 10 years, starting in 2011. Most of them targeted at families earning more than $250,000 a year. These individuals face $636 billion in new taxes. That includes $338 billion from letting the Bush income tax cuts expire, but also an increase in the capital gains tax and a lowering of the deduction for charitable giving. President Obama would push an additional $353 billion in new tax hikes on businesses.
Congressional Democrats are especially eager to fulfill a major campaign promise: pay for their priorities by repealing President Bush's tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans. For example, couples making $250,000 a year and individuals making $200,000 will see their tax rate go up from 36% to 39.6%. That would get the government an estimated $310 billion.
It's about ending a cut that should not have been there in the first place, that contributed enormously to our deficit.
But Republicans standing on the other side of a deep philosophical divide argue it will cripple small business owners.
The notion that you raise taxes on the people who are most likely to create jobs in a recession, it just boggles our mind that they would actually try and pursue this sort of an economic agenda at this very time.
Republicans are also blasting the president's budget for not doing enough to cut spending.
What do you make of this aspect, though, of it, Governor? And that is that when he talks about this top 2% that he's going to tax, well, that's 80% of small business owners in America. 80% of the top 2%, that's 80% of business people. How is that going to impact them, and how does that impact jobs?
Okay, so we saw there a number of clips about first Obama explaining what his priorities were, and then the reaction of John Boehner, and some of the other government officials who felt that these tax increases were going to slow down investment and business economic activity, and as well as the fact that the people that were getting the tax increases were the people who were going to be using their money to bring the rest of the country out of the recession, apparently. And essentially, Obama is going to let Congress decide among themselves what spending they're going to cut and what spending they're going to keep in the budget. So it's not as if he's carving any of this into stone. This is the budget he's sending them that would be his dream budget, and now they're going to do what they need to do to pass it. So the criticism that is sort of being leveled at him with a lot of subtle invective and venom may be revealing the nature and the character of the kind of voices that are speaking out in the news media. And what I mean by that is we're hearing a lot of negativity about the tax increases on the wealthy and on the corporations, and a lot of negativity about cutting taxes on ordinary and spending more for benefits that accrue to the public.